My responsibility as a CISO and a CIO is to teach companies how to do dangerous things carefully. When I look at my background, defense and aviation, errors are measured in body count. In fintech, velocity is prime, but velocity is blind. What happens with AI when it's in the flow of life and work and not a proactive engagement? It's always passive, it's always on, always connected anywhere. And the question is, should it? Should it be able to make autonomous decisions on its own using that information?
Well, today I'm joined by Tope Iluyomade. He's a CIO and CISO, tremendous career, formerly at BetterUp and a whole bunch of different things. Tope, just to get us started, like you've had this amazing journey and it's gone from, General Dynamics through Alaska Airlines to BetterUp. You've gone through security and IT and AI and everything in between. Take us on a little tour of like the process you've gone through in your career. And in particular, like, were there big lessons learned along the way? What were the big beacon moments?
No, thanks, Matt. It's nice to meet you. Nice to meet your audience as well. Thank you for having me on this show. And before I dive into the answers, I just really wanted to stress how much I love the forum and the media you've offered our community. It's not necessarily the polish, here's our final outcome. And, I'll be as transparent about the things I knew as it was developing. And I'll also be honest that sometimes the career felt like falling upstairs, solving a problem and just being pulled by it.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever people ask me that question, how did you get into this place? And the real fancy answer is to say, hey, I knew exactly where I was going to be 15, 20 years ago. For me, that wasn't necessarily the case. I think one, I was obsessed with technology to start.
Yeah.
Like to me, it was magical coming from a place where power wasn't on all the time, and I used to sell chicken, like as a 6-year-old. I think whenever I came in contact with technology in America, there was this curiosity and optimism that really carried me through, and just how transformational it was. And so, career arc is probably finding the most impactful problems for, my tribe at the time, whether it's a bunch of 7 or 8-year-olds that are struggling with speech therapy, till later on in college, learning about fintech, how money movement is, remittance from your parents to be able to survive. So it became very personal. I think, my advice to people is find the thing that's personal, that drives your passion, and you would eventually find a current that pulls you along into a great arc in your story that's meant uniquely for you. Right.
Fascinating. And so when you think about that, like one of the things, most recently you were at BetterUp, and I think you ended up writing this kind of fascinating article on LinkedIn about what BetterUp taught you about building ethical AI. And this is kind of a topic du jour right now because everyone is sort of wrestling with AI, and I think it's probably showing us some uncomfortable things about, technology and people operating together. Tell me a little bit about what that was about and what was the lesson learned there?
No, I mean, the calling for better up for me, one, just, great vision from the founders that I really enjoyed. And I think when I think about my theme of my career, I live in the shadows and blessings of mentorship, to be
Mhm.
honest, right? And this is why it's really important to give it back. And one of the things that's always piqued my interest, how do you scale that, right? How do you take there's number of experts that are not necessarily in academia or LinkedIn that offer such immense insights. And when Better approached me about being their CIO and CISO, I looked at a company that sat at the intersection of B2B and
Mhm.
coaching people through their careers. And they've actually scaled that and industrialized that. But I also recognized there was technology changes, society changes that were
Mhm.
coming. I think features come well ahead of compliance and
Uh-huh.
regulatory. So whenever I see an industry really breaking ground like that, shortly after there is a big push to really
Um,
stabilize and standardize some of the concerns and risks that come with that kind of technology. So it's been great. What BetterUp is showed me is it's not about the technology. You have to really think about policies.
Okay.
And if people take a step back, policies are meant to throttle the introduction of technology so we have a handle around it. And so whenever you see a technology, it's not about whether the glass is half full or half empty. does the glass have a handle? And my responsibility as a CISO and a CIO is to teach companies how to do dangerous things carefully. And that
Mhm.
runs the gamut besides being technology, it's compliance, cultural policies, government, everything that goes along with that.
So let me ask, like, that's a super fascinating, like, sort of as a general statement, it's super
Mm.
interesting. One of the things that I think is fascinating about watching AI adoption, because I'm old, and so I've been through a number of these sort of like giant transformations in technology. And every time it happens, I think two things are true. You're absolutely right. Regulations always lag whatever the technology change is. And it seems like there's some people who have like a beacon that they're following or some sort of a notion. And like, I think one of the things that's interesting is people who are like trying to reason about these new technologies. And it often is just very difficult because you don't know like how's it going to act or how's it going to scale or what are the downsides, that sort of stuff. When you're advising companies or when you're looking at companies and saying, hey, do you have a handle on this? A lot of times technologists are like, yeah, sure, of course we do. Like it's fine, but like they probably don't. So like when you're thinking about this or when you're talking to companies to figure out if they really have a handle on it, are there questions you ask or are they things that you use to sort of understand, oh no, actually we need to kind of wrap our arms around it this way or this way. How do you do that? How do you approach that problem?
But first, I have to challenge you being old, right? Like, we're from the same generation. I
Yep.
refuse to accept that.
Good.
And more, I just think that as you see technology, this AI wave, I've been
Yeah.
looking at it since, 18 years ago when I saw Terminator, and I was like, oh, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
And one thing we have to remember is every time there's a new introduction of technology that's so disruptive like this,
Mhm.
it resets all experience, right?
Okay.
So when you're not old, it's like becoming Benjamin Buttons. Like we're all
Okay.
getting younger. Wait,
Everybody's brand new again. Okay. Yeah.
brand new, so you're not far behind. And if you look at the current technologies, maybe someone has 2 years or more advanced,
Yeah.
experience on that space. So there's a great reset that happens with this kind of innovation arc. And so back to your question, right? When I go, I think, and this is for the audience, I think the first act of my career, um, we all have imposter syndromes. You want to prove that you're intelligent, you
Mhm.
answer the right questions, you know the answers to it. And I would say as a director, you know, most of the most of the things you're doing is providing answers.
Mhm.
Things that have certainty, right? 90%, we already have enough information. And that part of my career is trying to execute, operationalize. The uncertainty has already been handled for me.
Okay.
And then as you move this to a VP level, you're not just managing projects, you're managing portfolios, right?
Okay.
And the big difference when you get to the C-suite and the CIO, and what I've learned is how do you how do you facilitate the right decision making and the
Okay.
operating system for companies to continuously make the right decisions? And so as a person, you have to live in that model, right? My inquiries in every engagement is really insights, intellectual curiosity. Where can this go? It might not be the problem at hand, but you also want to kind of extrapolate and see around corners, right? So
Okay.
it requires being very inquisitive, not just looking at what's in the box that this thing was designed for, but potentially the adjacent interlocks that happen outside of your purview. And so to do that, I can really tell, by my calendar, right? My calendar is morphed from what it was before to now. In the early phases as a director and VP, your calendar is, project oriented.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
as you move to the C-suite, you're having conversations with the board prep, HR, legal, customers. And so that by definition, you're getting insights from a totally different audience, right? That are more
Mhm.
skeptical of the project. You have to be very much trustworthy. Trustworthy compounds. And the way that you gain trust is not being defensive about your baby, like your
Okay.
project, is actually opening it up, let it be scrutinized. And this is where academia and research helps me because peer review is brutal, right? Like you're not going to get kid gloves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to take that same approach as you get across, really deeper and deeper and higher in organizations. There's a lot of capable people, but who are making decisions around 51% certainty versus
Mhm.
90% certainty.
And do you think so? As you made the transition into that senior leadership, that C-suite, having to work with people from different organizations. One of the things that we've heard on the show consistently is that C-level transition ends up being like, oh wow, actually, this first team that I'm now working with is different than the previous teams I worked with because now I've got the finance people and I've got the HR team and I've got the engineering team and this sort of stuff, and these are my peers, these are my team members, and trying to figure out what they're doing. Like when you made the leap into the senior leadership team, how did you end up building the bridges, like say with the finance team, right? Like did you have enough finance background? Did you have to pick up what they were doing? Like how did you end up like understanding these different business functions so that you could communicate to them and you could sort of be inquisitive?
It seems pretty straightforward, but I think it's not necessarily about your point of view, it's about
Mm,
perspective around the
okay.
business. And if you come into a business with a single point of view predetermined, it really incurs a lot of friction, right? There's a lot of people that wonder if you have the full context. So for me, usually like almost like every executive listening to or understanding the history, the context, you're not necessarily the first person to think about a particular answer or solution. Obviously, it's been explored and might not have gone right. So one, I try to understand the organization or understand the personas, but I also offer complete transparency about me. I have certain biasness that I can't help, right? I see innovative technology. I want my hands on it. I want to play with it. I want to release it to the wild so people could see it. And then being very transparent with people what your agenda is. And then you have to learn those other departments, their perspective as well. So on the finance side, what I did early in my career, whether it was GE or any other organization, is I spent a lot of time with the CFO. And it
Okay.
was just, I might not be relevant for the meeting,
Yep.
but do you mind I'd be a fly in the wall. And what
Gotcha. Okay.
you learn is how they digest information,
Yeah.
and it was very clear to me, CFOs want simplicity. You could say a lot
Okay.
of jargon, but hey, I'm managing investments. Is
Yeah.
this the right investment? Convince me it is, right? Not
Yep.
about your technology. And you do the same thing for every department. You start to understand why people made their career around these particular functions. They have a certain way of thinking about certain problems. They're creative. They have the same value or more that you're providing, and you need to be able to align and interlock to that for that to make sense. You don't want to necessarily be adjacent to it. You need to fold yourself an alignment as a gate towards a unified goal together.
So you've said something here, and I want to underline it, and then potentially ask you kind of an unfair, out of left field question. But one of the things that you've just described is sort of like valuing a bunch of other perspectives that are just vastly different than your own, right?
Yeah,
And like being able to then sort of like translate your world into theirs and their world into yours, so that you can sort of accomplish some sort of a shared goal. That's what I was taking out of what you were saying. One of the things I'm interested in is that's a real skill. Like there's a skill in being able to see other people's perspectives and value them. It's not actually like particularly early in career, very hard. My early career was I was an engineer, and so if you didn't show up speaking bits and bytes, I didn't have a lot of time for you, candidly, right? I'm curious, like when did you pick that up? Was it a thing that you sort of like learned early in your life, early in your career? How did you end up sort of coming to this point of having, for lack of a better way to put it, a lot of empathy and introspection around this?
I love people,
Okay.
and I am an optimist. And the foundation to that, I have to admit, growing up in a small town in Africa, and I remember being exposed to the first outside person. In my mind, it was Indiana Jones. What else is out there?
Okay. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, and that lets me look at people. Majority of people are good, right? Like even though
Yeah.
we have overwhelming bad media news about the negative, you run into majority of people, they're decent, they want to help each other, not necessarily the headline news. And that is allowed me to be very vulnerable. I get to look at people in the eye, and if we strip away politics, everything else, and then you're vulnerable with certain people, it really they reflect back in the human nature side. And so for me, that has been the foundation, even outside of corporate world. Um, I look at, I look at the kids that I advise in the future on
Yeah.
the bright side, unbiased. Those same kids are now adults in a
Mhm.
corporation,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
haven't lost the empathy. It's a veneer sometimes of a shield to make
Yeah.
sure you can make hard decisions.
Sure.
And so that lets me approach people first, regardless of the problem that I'm trying to solve in a corporation, get to know what matters to them. And then, we could really unify by solving problems together. It's not, I have a list of problems.
Yeah.
It's a conduit to really interlock you with people. And if you do it correctly, it's like a conversation in a bar.
Yeah.
It's mutually beneficiary for both people.
So it's a fascinating. So I'll share. Early on in my career, I had this moment. And it was one of those aha moments that you were
Yeah.
talking about in your journey. I was working on a project. I'd been seconded to it, and it was like at a customer site with a whole bunch of people who were much much older than I am, much more experienced, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I had just been part of this project, no idea what was going on, and so partway through this thing, I'm in the meeting and I'm just trying to pretend. I'm literally just like, well, if I nod my head at the right time, like everyone will think everything's okay. But I'm terrified to be discovered that I have no idea what's going on. And finally, somebody asked me a question and I couldn't dodge it anymore. Finally, I just had to be like, "Guys, I'm sorry. I have no idea what the hell's going on. Like, I've been on this for 30 minutes. It's actually not my background." And there was like this long pause, like 30 seconds, and I'm like, "I'm gonna lose my job today, right?" And then everyone else in the room went, "Oh yeah, me too. I was second this project. I have no idea what the hell's going on." And we realized together that no one in the room had any idea what was going on. And there was this like collaborative moment of like, well, then I guess we better figure it out, right? And it turned into this thing. And it taught me this tremendous value because you just mentioned the value and vulnerability of being able to go in and be like, I don't know, right? I don't know, and I need your help. And you do that, most people respond really, really well to that and be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, sure, I'll absolutely help you." So it really resonates to me in that.
It's right. I mean, those moments give me goosebumps, right? Because it's not necessarily theater at that point. Everyone is just stripped away and they're ready to talk about this thing from a place of ignorance, and it's okay. And you mentioned it, right? Like, oh, I spent a lot of time in nursing homes.
Okay.
I used to work at a Hebrew home when I was in high school. It was great
Mhm.
for high school because you could do your homework, sit at a desk,
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it also gave you a point of view. I spent time with so many 80 and 90-year-olds as a teenager,
Yeah,
survived Holocaust wars and, great generation. And one thing was swing for the fence, right?
yeah,
Really, you know, you only have 80 summers, 80
yeah.
winters. Don't waste it. Really have great conversations. The journey is better to go with people than to go it alone. And you do that by being very direct about what you know and how you can help and where you're looking to go. And so I think that's the underlying philosophy of my leadership philosophy. I spend a lot of time to know even my stakeholders, internal and external.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot a bit, perhaps inelegantly, and just ask, like, one of the companies that you were at, you ended up, I heard that you were like at a company, and they were doing an optimization of their distribution network, and one of the questions you ended up asking them was like, okay, well, who's getting laid off at the end of this, right? And I'm super curious, like, what 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 was coming up for you at that time? What did you learn out of that experience? Like, what was the situation? What was the lesson there?
And it comes next back to BetterUp, and so I'll take you back to that. That was, 6 months or a year before COVID, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think the world was significantly different when you think about supply
Yeah,
chain. It was about velocity and speed, right?
yeah,
Um, is when I look at my background, defense and aviation, errors are measured in body counts, like, to be direct.
yeah, yeah,
You do not these impacts lives. Um, fintech, velocity is prime, but velocity is blind. And supply chain is a combination of both, right? And I
okay,
wasn't aware of that, right? Where it impacts lives significantly,
yeah,
whether pharmaceutical medicine gets to the right person on time, there's a distribution network, monetary payments to facilitate that because there's a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that are supporting some of our favorite large corporations, but their bank account is running with very lax rules between payments. And so as I was going through the supply chain, just direct with you, everything that's efficiency leads to a job elimination. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to eliminate workers. And when you think about Europe, Europe is very geared towards protecting workers. Even if
yeah,
you optimize a certain area, there's going to be work or there's going to be a pivot to find roles for those workers.
yeah.
In the US, we protect jobs, not necessarily workers. Like we're working on it. There's a lot of just great initiatives around that. But when you think about that, what it means is that you're gonna displace a driver because
Mhm.
instead of needing shipments, to go this route, there's less optimization to go that route. That means a driver needs to be retrained. And
Mhm.
one of the things that led to it as I looked at my career was supply chain. You knew you were going to make the world more efficient. 20 years of people making this particular workflow and process efficient, and we still find 7% improvement. Okay, that is going to continuously drive elimination of certain roles. And then when you look at BetterUp, another side of it is how do we make sure that there is a new up level role and development and skill journey for those workers that are being
Mhm.
replaced? And it's, I would tell you there's no corporation just thinking about just eliminating workers for the sake of it, but they're thinking about this is the role I need to live up to my investors. We need government and organizations to help drive the connected tissue to bring that into a full loop,
Mhm.
right? Development of those people displaced, bring them back. And so that's what brought me to BetterUp, and that's what connected the the supply chain
Yeah.
optimization that we did for Unilever, Pfizer, Merck into okay, there needs to be a development loop for the people that might be displaced as this technology adoption kind of increases over time.
That makes tons of sense, and just, like, leaning into that with the idea that, like, hey, at the end of the day, we're optimizing in a lot of cases, the business is optimizing for a set of numbers and a bottom line, but one of the jobs of management and leadership is to understand that there's actually, like, a human component in this machine, and this is actually something that I deal with a lot in leadership as well. It's sort of like, okay, you could be a flinty-eyed capitalist, and you could say, "Okay, yeah, we're just gonna grind everyone into powder." Like, that's available to you, and people have done it, right?
Yeah.
Or you can try to do the graduate school version of the thing, which is like, "Hey, let's be a little better than that," as a thing. One of the things I'm super interested in, like, and, pivoting a little bit to the framework, you've talked before about this idea of, like, can you build something and should you build it, right? And this idea, like, I think that you had mentioned before this framework that you have care plus M framework. I'm kind of curious when you think about AI deployments and how they impact people and stuff like that. What's the framework? How do you think about them?
If you would ask me 2, 3 years ago, even, there was a lot of focus on the how
Okay.
when you're building AI. Um, I'm growing still, and I didn't get this right, to be honest, probably most of my career. So it's not too late for everyone. And I would say is now the focus on the outcome. Is it actually going to move the needle of outcome that we care about, or are we
Mhm.
talking something shiny just for the sake of it?
Yeah.
And so when I build AI and work with teams that build AI, now I start to really question the outcome, not the intermediate outcome, but the long-term outcome that we're trying to generate, right? So yes, I'm building AI coaching that might serve individuals, right? Um, but if you take a step back, I'm looking at AI as a massive enabler, right,
Mhm.
of cognitive logic. So when I look at the Oregon Trail piece, it was a program and software that's digitized skills. Hey, that person that fixed the wagon, the
Mhm.
doctor you needed on the trail. Where we're gonna start to see, and I think with AI is right now in the browser and it's
Mhm.
used for, proactive engagement. What happens with AI when it's in the flow of life and work and
Mhm.
not a proactively engaging, it's always passive, it's always on, always connected anywhere, right? That's a different AI outcome that you're generating, and it
Mhm.
requires different risk and assessment when it comes to that. So I think like when you look today, what the patterns are, not just what we're seeing in the next 6 months, but you're gonna start to see AI has ability to see what you see in the real world, be able to sense the things that you sense in the real world, and the question is, should it? Should it be able to make autonomous decisions on its own using that information? I think personally, this is where I might differ from some of my peers or others. I think machines are meant to be in service of humans,
Mhm.
and AI could could really take data and execute correctly, but to interpret whether you should build that, a human really needs to look at the consequences, right?
M'kay.
Consequences worth it to even go on this endeavor to build this functionality. Right.
And when you think about that, when you're asking the question, Should we? And what are the consequences? Are you evaluating that in a moral framework? Are you evaluating that in a business framework? Like, how do you balance those things? Because this is where I think it gets really, really interesting. Like, there are companies that are like, we actually think it'd be a great idea if we could monitor people's faces and identify them from 1,000 feet away and like put them into various categories and stuff. And there's other people who are like, that's a terrible idea. We see where this ends, right? And so, like, I'm super fascinated when you've been approaching these problems. Like, do you have a sort of a rule of thumb or a model in your head of like, okay, well, let's have a human frame of morality, and then some business results. Business results are all like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back, right? We were
Yeah,
talking about the 3 acts that I've been through is
yeah,
defense and aviation. There's human harm, right? Body counts that could be, catastrophic. If you build an AI for that lens and that
mm,
lane, certain things should be hard.
yeah,
Um, if you look at the CEOs of the AI companies, one of the biggest debate is AI use in defense.
yeah,
Um, I don't think it's a binary decision, but the determination to end human life using a autonomous missile or drone, it should have oversight. It should be a
yeah,
hard felt, to the human heart about whether this is the right decision and the outcome is worth it, right?
yeah,
Um, and there's always that famous quote: "It's better to let 1,000 guilty people leave than to have one innocent person." I
yeah,
think like that is the core essence of being human, right? That
yeah,
separates us from being machines. So in
yeah,
that lens, I think when you build AI, there is this distinction to figure out what problem set this
yeah,
is.
yeah,
Uh, Now you went to the other side, which okay, it's not aviation. It might be for pleasure or recreation.
yeah.
And there's consequences for that, but it's not as severe, right? I have this debate with my kids all the time whether they should be, on Roblox or using any kind of games like
Screen
that.
time, the whole 9 yards. Like, is it an addictive little thing we put in our pocket?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, I might raise some broken kids, but it's very contained, right? Like that's a decision in AI use that
yeah,
is not a wild, spread. And then
yeah,
in between, you have medical use, right? We
yeah,
talk about humanoids and be able to have medical care at any given time. Like, how can that go wrong? Like, it's when you want AI to be widely available, widely adopted, people to be able to override your initial conception as long as it meets certain parameters of human safety, right? So those are the way I look at that's the way I look at the different lanes. There's certain things that definitely require guardrails at inception, and it's better to design than to retroactively bolt on. And then there's the other side, which is, we're in an experimentation phase. Like this is where the consequences might not be as severe, but the upside might be significant, and it's worth us exploring a lot more than where we've started off
so
with.
you might loosen those things a little bit and be like, "Hey, let's make sure that we've got this hard guardrails, but within this, let's play around a little bit and kind of see where it goes." Right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Right.
Well, it is a fascinating thing. One of the things that's interesting is watching kind of the pendulum swing, right? So, there was the AI luminaries and sort of the Twitter sphere were all aflutter with, well, we should measure engineers based on their token usage. Like that was actually a thing a couple months ago. And now we're seeing the articles of like CEOs terrified about how much AI is costing them, right? We're kind of going back and forth exploring this space, right?
Yeah.
And I think just like a lot of other things, we're going to end up probably having it settle somewhere kind of in the middle with like, oh, okay, we have a general reasoning of this thing. But that goes back to your earlier point about, you know, uh, compliance or regulation trailing, technology as our understanding improves and that kind of stuff. So I'm super curious. Um, I'm gonna pivot back to sort of you like as you're a kid, you're growing up in Nigeria, you have experience, you come to the United States, and you build this amazing career. If you're looking at a younger person today, you said you do some coaching of younger people and things like this. What's your advice that you give them about like, having a career or something like that? If you were talking to a younger you, what would you say to like, because I know exactly what I would say to younger me, right?
Well,
But like,
I'm curious. What would you say?
well, I mean, I was not early days, I was not that great a student. I had a bunch of sort of like issues, like the raging unmedicated case of ADHD that seems to be absolutely prototypical for going into IT or technology, right? But I had that and we weren't good at dealing with that back then. One of the things I would have talked to younger me about is to say like it is not X amount of brains equals Y results. It is X amount of brains times Y amount of effort equals Z amount of results, right? So the effort you put in is directly proportional to the results that you get. So if you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to achieve the thing that you need, you just need to be the hardest working, right? I would have told my younger self that because like I was mostly like, I'm never gonna figure it out. I'll be on my skateboard, that kind of thing, right? So how about you? Like, what would you tell younger you? Yeah.
I mean, I'm experiencing this now, even with my nephews, nieces, and kids that I advise. Um, some of the things that I thought of when I was younger was like talking prom and recess.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, people hear me say this often is there's certain problems that are meant for high school and there's certain problems that are meant for like elementary school. They don't overlap.
Okay.
So, when you're engaging with youth around AI, there's this profound like long-term view and the consequences, which is great. Um and not necessarily a big focus and sometimes excitement to grab the current moment. And
Okay.
I had this great interview with my daughter and I've spoken to her class. They're worried about environmental implications of AI, right? Like
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
prime great example. And, it's if everything stays a status quo, they might be right. But can AI really bend the curve and introduce like technology, innovations that impede that or even make society better environmentally? I don't know, right? That's your job as this generation to really teach us where we use AI for the society that you're going to run. And you get to make those rules. It's not us
Weird.
making rules that are going to outlast us. You are going to be in these positions of these people that are building the technology today, and you need to be equipped to understand it, not just fantasize about it from just, few-minute
Okay.
videos to really
Interesting.
make
Yeah.
it in that. So that's one thing that I would really, advise, and then lean into ignorance is bliss, right? Um, there's I just gave this advice to a bunch of 15-year-olds. If you are very gritty and determined and work and you reach out to an adult in any sector and they see your determination, they're gonna give you a chance, right?
Mhm.
Because, there's not that many people that put themselves to be vulnerable to reach out to get help. Um, you know, find really great people. And then your job right now in the youth is to learn to solve problems. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter what kind of problems it is.
Yeah.
That ability to critical reason, not to fall into fear, learn to unpack complicated things and solve it sequentially and work your way to the overall outcome, that translates to everything.
Yeah.
And I did it for every job, whether I was a lifeguard or whether I worked at Chuck E. Cheese and this suit is hot. How do I really, make it breathable to another industry? And those things as youth actually helped me quite a bit in my day to day and just how to solve problems, whether it's the right problem, maybe whether this problem is even meant for me to solve, or is it
Yeah.
an opportunity to let someone else shine, knowing that you're teaching them how to fish and they'll be a better contributor to you than you solving that problem and getting it off your plate. So, yeah, I think that's one thing I would tell myself.
That makes tons of sense, and I mean, I think the idea of grit and determination together with sort of like just trying to get better at solving problems. One of the things that's fascinating to me is if you would approach young me, like I'm fresh out of engineering school and I'm like or even about to go into engineering school, and you told me, "Hey, at some point you're gonna be the CEO of your own company, and most of the problems you're gonna deal with are people problems." I would have been like, "That sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard." You know what I mean? But the thing is, you pick up this bag of skills as you go through, right? And you don't know which skill is gonna be useful. So it's honestly like you're playing like a game like D&D or something like this. You're just putting stuff in the bag because
It's
maybe it's gonna be useful, right? And then you find that one situation and you're like, "Actually, this lesson was yeah, there it is," right? "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had that." And what was I don't know, what's been crazy for me is, um watching my kids. So my kids are sort of like I have a 19 and a 21-year-old, and they are, at the point in their lives where they're really starting to struggle for the first time, like really struggle, like school is legitimately hard, or I'm legitimately going through some life thing, you know? And in those struggles, they're like, "Oh, this sucks." And I'm like, "Yes, but this is the stuff that makes you you." So when you are, in your 50s or your 40s, you're gonna be like, "Ah, I learned this. I learned how to struggle," this kinda thing. So that's one of the things that I try to impart. They roll their eyes and don't
I
listen,
was
but,
gonna say, I try to
Scott,
manufacture problems for my kids and stuff, like, did you do this? All the time. So
Exactly.
I don't know,
Yeah.
it's backfired a little bit for
Oh,
me, but I love the general
yeah.
idea. Yeah, it's problem solving, whether I'm a parent, whether I'm a mentor, whether I'm an executive. What has changed for me is I get so much joy watching people build that operating
Yeah.
systems to solve problems, and they become. I mean, the mesh becomes a lot stronger, right? When you all know how to solve those problems and you could do blind passes. And
Yeah.
so you're allowed to make mistakes when you're young. The world is forgiving. Don't be so harsh on yourself and take some chances. And then get in the game, right? Really don't sit on the sideline. Go work for free for any company that you love and try to find out the right problems. And eventually, that bag that Matt is talking about is full, right? And then one day you have a feather to pull out of each one, right?
Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us. I really appreciate it. It was great getting a chance to chat.
Matt, thanks for having me. I really love your forum, and the discussion was great. And if I can help anyone that's listening to this, please don't hesitate to reach out. It's been a fortunate, lucky experience to run into people like Matt and people that are offering insights, and I'm hoping to pay it forward as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you.